Yeah.
Here we are, episode 6, I believe. I've lost count, to be honest, which is terrible because it's either 5 or 6 and not that.
Fuck him, man. Just let him roll on. Let him roll on.
But the big news is that we have a name, and it's not just the Vin and Phil show anymore. We've extended it to longer. We've made it tuned up and tuned in with Vin and Phil.
Yeah.
And Lord knows I am definitely tuned up right now.
Yeah, that's the way it should be, man. Now let's get tuned in. And I guess joining us today, we have a very, 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 very special guest. We've actually mentioned him more than once on this show. And so far, he's kind of just been a mysterious, incredible presence that just we talk about. But he is a real person. He is here. He is a producer, guitar player, writer, mixing engineer, co-host of an amazing podcast, one of my closest friends, a mentor, a teacher. I mean, the list just goes
all
on.
of the above,
and many, many, many more things. His name is Mark Dollar. So please, everyone, welcome Mark Dollar to the show.
How you guys doing today? What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on the show.
Fantastic
you guys
to have you.
Are awesome. You guys have a great podcast. I love the information that you guys really throw at your songs that you review every single week. And I'm just here and, ready to dig in.
Yeah, man. We're really glad to have you.
Yeah, baby.
Thank you for taking the time. Well, so before we dive too deep into our little chat today, I guess let's first, we got a couple bullet points we usually like to start out with. And the first one is that we have a Spotify playlist that you can follow along with. And it has all of the songs that we've talked about in other podcasts and we'll be talking about in this podcast today. It stays up to date, and I suggest that as you listen or watch our podcast, that you stop and take a listen to the songs, and that way you have a reference point as to what we're talking about. It's really the best way, in my opinion, to get the most use out of this. And then it's also just a great playlist to check out and listen to.
Of course. Put it on. Have a social distance party. Put the playlist on. Put this fucking playlist on. Everyone's going to have a good time.
Absolutely. And our next note is that we are all working musicians and producers. We work in the music industry of all sorts. And obviously during this time, things have slowed down a bit for us. We're all doing our best. But if you are feeling that you could give a little something out of the kindness of your heart and just want to support us or the show, we all have different methods of making sure that you can give us a little something. Vin and I have Venmo. Vin's is at Vincent-Mott. That's M-O-T-T with 2 T's. Mine is at Phil-Silverberg. That's silver like the metal, B-E-R-G. And then Mark here has Cashapp, and his call sign there is $, God with a capital G, River Audio, God River Audio, all one word. So $ God River Audio. And like I said, feel free to send us a little something if you're feeling generous. And last but not least, we are, like I said, we all work putting out music, and we recently all have been working on projects. Vin has a new project that he just put out about
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago today.
And we'll be including the link down in the description to that. So I suggest checking it out, and buying it would be awesome. It's another way to support Vin, and that would be awesome. And I recently put out a new song last Friday under my artist name Lo-Fi. That's L-O-P-H-I. The song's called Oolong. Just came out. It's a nice little instrumental track that I really meant to just help people relax. And then I'm going to let Mr. Dollar here talk about if he's got any project or anything that he wants to let the people know about. Let him know, Mark.
All right, now I got this metal record coming out by a band named Views into Vastness. Just finished that up a few months ago. They're waiting for their cover art to get done and CDs to get back. That one's called Ascend. That should be out by, if not the middle of the summer, which is pretty much in a few weeks. It'll be out in the fall. I am working on a record named, the band is named DMC, otherwise known as Death Metal Chicks.
Oh, yeah.
I do that with my cousin, Maurice Watson. That's kind of like hard rock and, it's just all kind of nostalgic vibes. That should be out coming up in the fall. I'm working with a good friend of ours, Aaron Lockett. We're doing an EP. I'm producing it. Got all my friends involved, as many as possible. And that should be coming out. I think that one's going to be called Whirly. We've been calling it Whirly. So yeah, that one should be done by the fall as well. So that's what's on the Godriveraudio calendar.
Busy, man.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Before it slipped my mind, Mark mentioned Mo, and he is somebody else that I would love to bring on because another person with just a super eclectic repertoire and deep, vast knowledge of music that you wouldn't even know is out there. And this guy,
I think the moral of the story is no one who you're gonna see as a guest on this podcast, no one is like a one and done. Like, because everybody's got so many layers to their knowledge and their careers, and everybody's got so much to say. And so we're gonna get, Mark. You're gonna see Mark again. Mo, we're going to get Mo on here at some point. We're going to talk drums. We're going to talk all sorts of stuff. Mo and Mark, really, they're the music that Mo and Mark play spans so many different genres, I think that's amazing. It's a really cool thing, man. Where I'm like a one-trick pony over here. I'm like, if it smells like chicken shit, it's for me, you know what I mean? And that's basically all I do.
Come on, Vin. You're cold-blooded. Playing the drums, songwriting. Come on, man. I'm going to say this. It's not easy writing the blues the way you do it.
There was one point in time where I was playing like some emo shit,
Yeah, I remember that time. We talked about that.
There was one point in time, man, where I was like an emo motherfucker playing some emo shit. But I was also 16 or 15.
Yeah, dude. Hey, man. I mean, all of that stuff is super fun. It's cool to still be in contact with how that sound has changed from when we were like 16 years of age. I think the new kids are doing something really, really cool with it. So you may want to take a few listens every now and then.
Yeah.
Check out on your boys,
Hell yeah.
Your 16-year-old boys.
Well, that being said, I guess let's dive in. The last week or two, is it just last week? Whatever. We've been talking about lyrics.
2 or 3 weeks now. I think this might be week 3. I don't know. Doesn't matter.
Really not good with that whole part. We just keep.
Doesn't fucking matter. We seem to be going in like 3 blocks of 3 weeks.
Seems about right.
Topics before we move.
So we're continuing on with lyrics and the people that wrote those lyrics. Last week we talked about Danzig and Billy Joel, which was awesome. I enjoyed it.
And now you have a playlist that goes from Danzig to Billy Joel.
To James Brown.
To James Brown. From James Brown to Danzig to Billy Joel.
Back to P-Funk. Yeah. But yeah, so we're going to continue on, and I know that each of us have picked at least one song, maybe even more than one song to talk about, and they're a little bit all over the place, but there is no rules other than pick a song. So I guess I'm going to lead the way today, and I picked one. I had mentioned on the last episode that I wanted to do like a Nirvana song, and So I am. And I guess the reason I picked Nirvana, obviously they're freaking Nirvana.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, there are definitely people who consider and definitely look at Kurt's lyrics and are, they really analyze them. But I think it gets overshadowed sometimes by the overall picture of just what Nirvana was or is as a band. I think, I haven't had that many open discussions with people about the lyrics too often, other than like songwriters about the lyrics that are in Nirvana songs. I mean, I guess I do. It's hard to explain. You know what I'm saying? I don't know that it's the focus always, but it's awesome. Is the point.
I mean, they were one of the biggest fucking bands of the early '90s for multiple reasons.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right. And for me, when I was in high school, I mean, it sounds like cliche, but yeah, when I was in high school, this was like the band for me. I guess I was in my teenage angst years, and I was really feeling it. And I became obsessed. Like, there's people who like get into it and they're like, yeah, this is the whole discography. I found everything you could find that you could pop, every recording that existed of Nirvana. I went and found. I listened to the trashiest, crappiest recordings of bootleg shit basement recordings because I just wanted to hear it. I was obsessed. I was intrigued by Kurt Cobain. And as I was listening to all of that, I was reading his journals, which had just been released, so that you could actually see some of his journals and what was going on.
Right.
While also reading a biography about it. And so like I was having this outside perspective, his inside perspective, and listening to the music at the same time. And it really just gave me like, this dude was remarkable. And it's sad that he went so soon. It's also not so surprising when you look at all of it. He was the fuse was lit. He was, I don't know. It was going to be a short spark because he was so explosive. Like there was so much power there. Just mind blowing. And this song in particular, the song that I'm going to talk about is Territorial Pissings. And the reason I picked this one is because it's powerful verses. The verses are 2 lines each. And I've mentioned before that I don't really listen to lyrics. It's not, I do, but it's not, my brain doesn't get pulled there first. I get pulled to the music side of things first. And this song has a lyric in it that has just immediately, when I think Nirvana, and I'm trying to think of like what's a lyric from Nirvana, this one is the first one that comes to mind. Well, yes, and it's just because I'm paranoid, or just because you're paranoid, doesn't mean they're not watching.
Mm.
And I actually, upon further research today, I thought that was like a genius Kurt Cobain lyric, and it still is. But I didn't know, because I did not read the book, A Catch-22, which is a book I was probably supposed to read in high school also. But I was busy listening to Kurt Cobain, so I
only knew the shitty ska band.
So, but I love that lyric, and it stuck out to me, and so I just wanted to take a look at this song. From a musical perspective, the song is really straightforward. It is entirely A major, F major, D major. I dig it. It's actually super cool if you really look at the chords. Like it's not to be all those major chords. Those are weird intervals, but it's really just descending through a minor chord, but not.
Well, one of my favorite things about Kurt Cobain is, the truth be told, he only knew how to play one chord, really. If you really listen to the early Nirvana songs, he's not changing that kind of block, stock major chord shape. And I actually love that. That's something that always stuck out to me in his guitar playing, because when you hear a Nirvana song, it's always like a bigger sense of melody going on, but you can almost tell that it wasn't intentional. It was just that's the way he played, and it just kind of made things sound a little different.
It's sort of out of necessity, where maybe he wasn't like so schooled as a musician and as a guitar player. That's just what he knew how to do.
No,
yeah.
Yeah, well, not to mention, I think, knowing what we know about him, he wasn't concerned about that part of his education. In fact, we know he was a huge blues fan and just understood, like,
I didn't know that.
oh, dude,
I didn't know that.
he talks about
Really?
he does like covers of Leadbelly songs and gospel.
Oh well, that I did know.
Oh no, yeah, dude. That's a part of his whole thing. It was definitely he was into like blues.
I thought it was shit. I thought that was like a fluke.
No.
That
And it goes
that tune was on the one tune I know from Unplugged.
Oh no, he would fall in love with it. He would be grabbed by, let me go listen to. Holy crap, where did that come from? And then he would go to that. And yeah, there's that song that the Vaselines did a cover of, that he did a cover of. I forget which one was that. Like Jesus Don't Want Me for a Sunbeam or something like that. I forget if that one. Anyway, huge background, and I think it goes into what we were talking about with Danzig last week, about that sometimes these guys, we don't necessarily consider them, we don't think about how well studied or how knowledgeable they actually are. To pull from Catch-22 for a lyric, and to be referenced, to have these blues backgrounds and be well studied in those kinds of things. There was an understanding of as grungy as grunge is, it came from a thing, and it would make sense.
Right. There has to be somebody or something that like drives the car. You know what I mean? There has to be somebody driving that bus.
Right.
There has to be something, some influence somewhere. It doesn't just pop out of midair. You know what I mean? There's somebody's driving that bus.
Sure.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But so, I mean, I guess that's the main thing. And I'll just dive in because the lyrics won't take me too long to talk about. That was my main spiel, really. But lyrically, there's not a lot. It's not dense. It's just heavy. And that's why I love it. So first of all, the song starts out with, if you guys go listen to it on the Spotify playlist, again, the Vin and Phil show.
Wait,
Vin
is it that on Spotify?
For now, it's still Vin and Phil. I haven't changed it officially to the tuned up and tuned in, but we will. It'll be the same playlist. Nobody will have to change a thing. But so go check that out. But it's at the beginning of the song. There's kind of Kurt. You can tell it's Kurt kind of messing around with the singing. Smile on your brother. Everybody get together right now. The Youngblood song, Get Together. And it's, I don't even know what that part in particular is a reference to. It's kind of just like this weird, again, if you go listen to it, you would know what I'm talking about. And then the song kind of comes right in with the heavy guitars, like real kind of punk influence, grungy kind of heavy thing. And then it gets right into, the first lyric, the first verse is, when I was an alien, cultures weren't opinions. And now it's kind of it's
got that District 9 vibe. Not that District 9 is like
room for
20 years after, but
there's room for interpretation. But again, I guess I know this from having done the research I did when I was younger. There are times that Kurt fantasized, at least when he was a child, about maybe he was an alien delivered to his parents. And he actually, I think he'd been a son. There's a reference to it in there. I think another one of his songs. So, he didn't, I don't know that he actually thought it, but it was like, a fantasy, a story of his that he would talk about. But so to me, this is a reference point to when I was younger, when I was an alien, so it's
knowing that was like a thing to them, you can surmise.
Right. Well, because then it makes the lyric make sense entirely. Then when you go, okay, when I was younger, cultures weren't opinions. Black, white, race, none of that. When I was younger, none of that mattered to me. It wasn't opinions. So when I was just a little alien, cultures didn't matter to me. And you could, however, it also is obviously like, this is clearly how this dude thought of himself, that he was an alien, like that he, you know what I mean? There's a deeper image to that in and of itself, that he really just didn't feel he fit in.
This is another topic that like we could spend days on. is like the psyche of Kurt Cobain.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I actually have a book of his, like, you know, his notebook.
Yeah, no, that's what I was.
Yeah, Phil was saying that too. Yeah,
And
yeah.
when I was in high school, I was reading the biography while reading his journals that had just come out.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. And it's incredible to see how some of the songs developed. And that, again, I think that's why I know some of these references of like the alien being him per se, you know. And I think there's some of that kind of stuff. But so that's the first verse. That's it. You know, it goes right in, and then it just gets right into the chorus, which is, gotta find a way, when I'm there. Gotta find a way, a better way, I'd better wait. First of all, from like, if you want to just like look at the songwriter thing, like the play of the words and the vowel sounds and how similar it all is when you're singing. I don't know if I even knew that those were exactly the words because of the way that he sings them to sound so similar. I don't know.
Can you read it again? What is it?
Gotta find a way when I'm there. Gotta find a way, a better way. I better wait.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So again, it's definitely interesting. All of their songs are his writing is room for interpretation. Of course, I think that's why people love it. Oh yeah, Mark's got the Whitley. We know. All right, shout it out. What you got there? No, give us the label side.
Tell us what you're drinking. Knob Creek.
We got that Knob Creek in the house. In the house.
Shit.
Knob Creek.
Yo, let me say this, Phil, man. That chorus, there's two ways to look at that chorus, man. The outside way, to me, as an outsider, is like it's ambiguous lines. You know what I mean? Like they're not really, you know. The first way to look at it is that like he's not that he's not saying anything, but it's too ambiguous to give meaning to, you know.
Well, that's one of the reasons I love the 90s, because it was really more about the play on words more than sometimes the lyrics. And
I think that's where the psyche of him comes in, is that like what with his ambiguity is it's not, you know, calling it ambiguous is a shallow way of looking at it, you know. Like there's definitely
I actually don't think it's ambiguous at all. I think when you hear lyrics like that, he's trying to get you closer to what he might or what you might actually think. There are times where sometimes those lyrics can actually make sense if you're really looking at them in a very artistic way. I think that's what the 90s were all about. Everybody was so insightful. Everybody had to listen differently than now. And I think when you, back in the 90s, you have people that were like scrolling through your lyric books, reading every single line. You had all these groups online or whatever when, you know, the internet started, you know, in the early 90s, that just talked about song meanings and stuff like that. So I think it was just a different time. And when you have that kind of access or like the permission to do that, you could kind of say whatever you want, you know?
Yeah.
And so I agree with all of that. I again, in this particular, well, to me, the way that I read this, and it is ambiguous, but I think that's partially how so many listeners were grabbed by it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's why people,
because that's that age-old songwriter trick of that you're writing these words, but you're writing them so that they have their own experience,
right,
to your words. You know what I mean?
Right. They're bringing the
so no matter what to the songwriter's head is the quote unquote story of this tune. You know, what really matters is what your listener is thinking when they're hearing those words. You know what I mean? And putting their own story on top of those words and making it connect to them. You know?
Also, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I would say that, Nirvana, is one of those widely, like, kind of interpreted bands, and where it's like, yeah, you feel what Ben is saying. You could go between fan and fan, and like they will say two completely different meanings for the same song.
Absolutely. Which is cool, and I mean, I guess that's why I bring this song to it. Some of these things, again, I like. I'm a freak. I admit I dive way too deep into like knowing about these people. Particularly, Kurt was somebody I really became, like I said, obsessed with. Like I wanted to know about him and why, what happened. What I wanted to know. And so when I look at this lyric, it's his inner monologue. It's him trying to find a way to fit in, and when I'm there is the like being famous. It's like it was like, I need to assimilate. I gotta find a way. I gotta not be this alien. I gotta find a way. I gotta find a better way. And then him having a second of like, wait, I better wait. That's gonna be terrible. Like, like he didn't really want that fame. That's how I read. I know that's a lot to take out of this. It really is. But to me, that's what it sounds. It sounds like a frantic. He yells it. It goes. That's the thing, is the verses kind of drop down, right?
Yeah.
That's important to recognize, is that the verses kind of the bass, it kind of takes, it's kind of bouncy, and when I was an alien, when I was, and then gotta find a way, a better.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's a frantic.
Gotta find a way,
Yeah, exactly. It's a very punk influenced vocal. Like
I still hear Aiden from School of Rock's voice singing it from the Nirvana show I taught.
But so like I said, that's just first verse. That's the first chorus. I'll keep flying through. The second verse is, never met a wise man. If so, it's a woman.
I missed whatever just happened before. If so, it's a woman.
Never met a wise man. If so, it's a woman. That's the verse.
Yeah.
So this one is actually not too much of a hidden message. He was very open about being like kind of feminist, and that he felt very much more comfortable with females than males typically, and that most of his friends were females, not males. He sincerely felt that like men were not necessarily they treat women poorly, they're brutes, and he just wasn't necessarily. I think part of that is also, we know that the relationship between his father and his mother, like, or lack thereof, his upbringing is not great. And so like there's not a surprise that there might be some part of that, his view of that. And I think he's just being pretty straightforward without being straightforward here. It's like the most not straightforward way to be straightforward. Never met a wise man. If it was a wise man, it was probably a woman.
Yeah.
You could even surmise, like, maybe he's talking about a transvestite or a transgender person, whatever he, sorry, I wrong terminology, but at that time, it's probably the right terminology. Sorry.
But that's like what I was saying is like,
right.
you can it's the listener that kind of makes the, what am I saying?
They bring their, they bring in, like, that's the meaning comes from.
I bet for a lot of people, like you said, man, I bet for a lot of people that's what it was in their head, like back in the early 90s, especially before, like, we knew, before we had the knowledge that we have and the fucking, the culture that we have now,
Yeah.
I bet for a lot of people that's what that was.
And then real fast, then the chorus just comes up again, same chorus. Again, it's that frantic, yelling kind of same lyrics. Third verse is the lyrics I've already talked about just because you're paranoid don't mean they're not after you, right? And like I said, that one just sticks out to me. It and particularly in this day and age, and I mean, it's always kind of been one of those things. It's an interesting thought. Just because you're paranoid, everyone's telling you you're paranoid doesn't mean that what you're thinking isn't true. And I think that's this whole song is just kind of his it's kind of just like these thoughts, his general views of the world that he's like,
yeah.
Just
I feel like when I hear the tones of the message, again, this is one of the reasons I love the 90s, is because it's kind of more so just like what are those, what do they call it? It's like a theme board where it's just like you just throw a lot of words on the wall. And for some reason, whatever those words are, you're going to get something that kind of brings a focus to those words. And when I hear that song and when I hear those things, is I basically hear from Kurt, don't be afraid to second guess yourself, to ask the question if needed. Don't be afraid to never be safe.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what the gotta find a way. Maybe he's yelling out to the idiots of the world. Maybe he's saying, these are these stupid views you have. We got to find a better way. Maybe that's what he said. Maybe that's really, and that's very, very. I wouldn't put it past him that was exactly what he was doing. That he would just be yelling. Real fast. I'm gonna just probably wrap my segment here. Pretty much hit it all. We talked about the final verse about the Catch-22 reference that Kurt made to that in there. And then it goes into a double chorus, basically, of just the got to get away, a better way. And then we talked about how the overall what that might mean. But like I said, that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it off with Territorial Pissings. And
yeah, man.
Check out that song on the Spotify playlist. And I guess, Mark, if you're feeling up to it,
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it, baby. Come on.
So take us down to Mark World Town place.
Mark World Town place. Cool. So
Dollar Town.
Dollar Town. The song I reviewed for this podcast is oddly enough in the same decade as that Territorial Pissing song, and coming from a band very kindred to Nirvana, and that's Alice in Chains, and the song is Rooster.
We've been waiting for an Alice in Chains talk.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Been waiting for it.
We've been waiting for it, and we're so glad that it's you to finally bring it.
There's nobody better, Mark. And I'll chime in real fast. You absolutely are going to be, in my mind, attached to Alice in Chains for me for a number of reasons, but forever. For the rest of my life, I will not be able to sing many of these songs without thinking of times singing them with you or actually seeing the band with you. And it's a band that I can honestly say I missed. And it was because I was so obsessed with Nirvana. Grunge, that was what grunge was to me. And I am thankful that your love for Alice in Chains and our other friends, James, Connor, I mean, the reason that I was exposed to Alice in Chains, and I am sincerely thankful because they have become one of my favorite bands, for sure, since my finding them so late in my life. So thank you. And there is really no better person that I'd want to hear talk about the band or a song than you. So
anytime, dude. I mean, I just love good music and I love sharing it with my friends. So anytime. And it's odd that or rather interesting that you went on with Territorial Pissing this week. Again, that's a song or a band. Nirvana is a band very kindred to Alice in Chains. But let's just talk about the 90s really quick and why I think the 90s, that decade, made Alice in Chains and bands like Nirvana into those bands that we look at as icons. For me, I mean, I don't think there was any better of a platform than if we had to look at it in terms of decades. If you go back to the 70s, yeah, there were funk bands, and there was all different types of music going on. But, there was like, a fever pitch and where you're trying to work to kind of be in the same vibe, whether it been production methods, whatever the case is. The 80s were much like that as well, and where everybody's, at least the most popular music, was like synthesizers and stuff like that. If you didn't have aspects of those things going on, your music might not have been as popular. Whereas the 90s, it really was. I don't think there's any other genre, a decade of music in where it really was a free-for-all. Like, you had, first of all, you just look at the bands, Alice in Chains, the Melvins, Mother Love Bone, Soundgarden, all those bands, they all came from one area. And if you look at just those bands alone, they are so different from one another. There were also several bands in that time that weren't in that kind of Seattle kind of based thing that had just as big as a tone. One of my biggest bands, favorite bands from that time, was a band named Failure, and it's very kindred to all these bands. But again, it just goes back to the 90s and how it was just a bigger kind of format for expression. You could literally write any song that you wanted to write back in the 90s. And as long as you carried some of the characteristics of a hit song or something that was catchy about it, just a part of it had to be catchy. But going back to Alice in Chains, you say, you would have never discovered them if it weren't for me. I'll be honest, like, there was a time, I mean, I grew up with 92.3 K-Rock, so I always heard Alice in Chains and stuff like that. But, like, I was just kind of slumped into all of the music that was happening in that time. And I was also interested in some of the newer music in that time. I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s. So by the time I was getting to be a younger or later adolescent, or I would say 12, 13, I was getting into bands like new metal stuff like Korn and weird stuff like that, and just getting heavier and heavier and heavier into the music. But like a band like Alice in Chains, yeah, they didn't pop up to me till much later anyway. Their discography, like, there's those iconic songs. You got Wood, Rooster, We Die Young. All those songs are the iconic ones. But then if you really look at their discography, it's just as in-depth and as beautiful as those iconic songs. And that's because of how Jerry and also how Lane wrote, along with the other guys, Mike Inez, I think the earlier bass player, I forget the drummer's name, Matt Starr, I think is the drummer's name. But basically all I'm saying is they had such a big format in the 90s to do whatever they wanted. And Jerry, who is a god at the guitar because of his arrangement values, really took on to that. if you look at Rooster, the song's in F. He tunes down to E flat. So yeah, on the sixth string, second fret would be F, and he's going switching between F and A flat, and doing different voices of those. Just two major chords, just bouncing back and forth. You could tell that this song was written like a vibe. It wasn't necessarily one of those songs that had like too much of a thought in terms of how we can arrange this, what we could put there. It was just like, okay, soft verse, little build up, tear into that rock and roll chorus, and with Alice in Chains staying kind of bluesy, it was very easy for them to kind of lay it down the right way. Talking about drums, I know, Vin, you're a drummer. I love drums. It's like you don't hear drummers playing to riffs like that. Nowadays, when you hear like a riff like da 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 da, like a drummer's not just trying to play straight through that. Da 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 da. They'll try to accent with the line.
Yeah,
and,
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Maybe I'm not explaining it the best way I can, but what I'm trying to say is, when you have a look at, the way that they were playing the grooves and making these grooves, you could tell that it was just about that main chorus groove that just kind of set them off. And kind of create the big contrast between the verse and the verse guitar to that big chorus section. One of my favorite solos is in this song too, because it's so simple. It's just a few octave notes, and that's it. I would like to talk about the songwriting a little bit. I got the chance of actually listening or watching some Jerry Cantrell interviews. I love Jerry so much. But he talks about this song in one of the interviews, and he talks about how he basically grew up with having a distant perception or a distant relationship with his dad. Like, he didn't really know his dad. They didn't have like a really great relationship. But after a while, they started really talking, having a relationship. His dad started to tell him stories about being in Vietnam and stuff like that, and how he came to be the way he was. Because, you talk to Jerry, his dad wasn't always, the best guy he could be at times. So with that being said, when you really look at the lyrics of the song, you could tell he's trying to illustrate what Vietnam could have felt like. But if you really look at some of the lyrics, it's kind of more so Jerry kind of, subconsciously like ripping or like painting this dark reality of what that man became because of because of his experiences. Jerry also ultimately had to understand that, that's just the way his dad is. And in order for him to just come to that kind of conclusion, you can only imagine the experiences that he's had with his dad. So what's interesting when you look at some of these lyrics, I'll read some of them just to start. Ain't found a way to kill me yet. Eyes burn with stinging sweat. Now, if we're going through this, you could tell he's, kind of going and reminiscing about maybe going through the fields of Nam and stuff Vietnam and stuff like that. Seems like every path leads me to nowhere, which is the kind of the bracket right there. It kind of goes in 3-line kind of forms. If you see, it goes 3 by 3, The chorus is just kind of 4 lines, and then they bring down, or they cut the second verse down. But ain't found a way to kill me yet. Eyes burn with stinging sweat. It seems every path leads me to nowhere. Wife and kids, household pet. Army green was no safe bet. The bullet screams to me from somewhere. It kind of, if you really look at those lyrics, it's like, yeah, he's talking about Vietnam, but he can also just be talking about his dad and like having like some PTSD about the situation, because
that's exactly what I got from you from reading those lyrics is that kind of vibe, and maybe even also like where he fits in with the whole, you know, his parental era, what's the word? I'm terrible with fucking words here. But like, you know, where he comes from was from the Vietnam era, right? And where does he fit in with that? Like, you know, it's a man who he lives in the same house with was being shot at, like in a war zone, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And
there may still be echoes of that, you know, like the echoes of those gunshots, you know?
Yeah,
that's just what I'm hearing in my head.
No,
and like I said, you know, the listener is the one who projects their images onto the writer's lyrics, you know?
I love that. I'm going to tell you why, because I mean, my grandfather did Vietnam as well. And he's one of the coldest brothers I know. He doesn't talk much. He just kind of does his own thing. He's a very lone kind of brother. You know, and you talk to him about Vietnam, he almost breaks down in tears. Like literally, the one time I talked to him about it, you know, like he was saying some things to me that they were forcing him to do, and you know, it will live with him forever. You know, I'm pretty sure he's not proud of some of the things he had to do, and I'm pretty sure he's not necessarily proud of the man he had to become in order to make that war work. However, he became that man, and my family has just gone to understand it more so than, you know, just trying to bear with
for
it
better,
again.
For better or worse, it's a part of his history and your family's history now.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, going through, you know, there's, again, little utterances. And again, you know, when you have a song from the 90s, it can go so far left and right. And that's what I love about that first verse. Let me just go the second verse. Walking tall, machine gun man. They spit on me in my homeland. Gloria sent me pictures of my boy. Got my pills against mosquito death. My buddy's breathing his dying breath. Oh God, won't you help me make it through? Again, like for me, it's like I kind of draw the line of like what is kind of in this actual nostalgia about fighting a war, and then going back into that kind of PTSD kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
Again, like when I know from my experiences, when something is that, like, you know, carries that much trauma for you, it's almost like you can easily switch back into that realm. You can almost go right back to where you were when you were feeling that. And that is a deep trauma worth, you know, kind of considering. Yeah. And so, yeah, for me, that's one of the things that made this song like super heavy. another thing that makes this record or Rooster and this particular, record Dirt that this was all on is that they did this during the LA riots, right after the cops got let off for killing or beating up Rodney King. They got found not guilty, and they literally predicted that the city of LA was going to go nuts. So like literally they had to like break from their recording to go, and they did a few days at Joshua Tree just to get away from LA and the time, but they felt all that pressure. So it was like kind of like in a way pushing them to kind of do the best thing that they could to make that record. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my kind of idea or some of the things I think about when I listen to that song. And again, Jerry Cantrell, Lane Staley, obviously, but Jerry Cantrell is like a god to me when it comes to guitar, and not only guitar but arrangement. I don't think I've heard anybody arrange on a guitar like he has.
Can I say a couple of things here?
Go for it.
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, this song, The Rooster, is a song that I've heard probably 1.5 billion times. I'm a child of the 90s. I was born in 89, you know what I mean? And just at the end of the 80s. So I for lack of a better way of explaining it, I'm a 90s kid, you know what I mean? I grew up in the 90s. I've heard this song 1.5 billion times. I don't think I ever once knew that this tune was a Vietnam War song, first of all. I don't think I ever knew that, ever, until you just said it.
Yeah.
Wow.
The other thing, and I wasn't, especially back in the day, kind of like Phil said, like my appreciation for this band kind of came through you, Mark, and James and Connor. You know what I mean? Like that's when I started. That's when I sat down and listened to some Alice in Chains. It was like, man, this shit's better than I thought. Because it wasn't my bag as a kid. As much as I liked Nirvana and Pearl Jam and shit, like Alice in Chains back in the day wasn't my thing. But like a lot of other things, it became my thing once I had a better understanding, a mature understanding of it. But the other thing I wanted to say, though, Mark, is we're talking about, this is a song that was written in the early 90s, right? And it's from an early 90s fucking, for lack of a better term, a grunge band, right? Yeah. And fucking, do you feel, and maybe I should say because I have always felt this, that the late 60s and the early 90s have a telepathic connection.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And it 100%. May be because the parents of the 90s kid, of the late 80s and early 90s kids are the hippies from the 60s, the original hippies. You know what I mean? And I used to talk about it all the time with my boy Charles Walker from back home. Shout out Charles Walker. If he fucking ever watches this, I don't know. But we used to always say it all the time because he was like the guy who got me on the 90s kick later in life. You know what I mean? Like long after, I'm talking in the 2000s, and I'm all about fucking babes and drinking beer and smoking weed at this point. But he was like, yo, dude, he was real into Pearl Jam and shit and fucking Alice in Chains. He was like, dude, the vibe of the late 60s and maybe the early 2000s, but really we just talked about the late 60s. The vibe is almost the same vibe in the early 90s, and the musically, it's almost the same vibe where shit was changing. Really big changes in music were happening. And it was a little more loose and about fucking what was like. I don't know, Phil. You got something?
Well, I just want to point out that based on what you're saying, I don't disagree with you at all. I think it's an awesome observation. But that being said, we're talking about basically 30-year cycles. We're talking about the third cycle right now. And again, if you look at our overall scene of the United States, because I mean, we're talking about, one would argue that we should be starting to see exactly that same kind of thing happening in music again, which I think we may see. You know, I'll be interested to see how is it going to come about. It's an interesting observation, but again, it's the same thing that there's the younger generation seems to be energized and aware of.
I've always felt the connection between like the hippie fucking Woodstock vibe of the 60s, the late 60s, and the grunge era of the early 90s. Almost they coincide. They're one and the same almost, but just that they were a little angrier, and punk rock had already happened. You know what I mean? For the 90s, and the 90s took that influence into itself, and the 80s too, and the fucking glam rock and the fucking, you know, even before Guns N' Roses, you know, all that shit, Motley Crue and all that shit took all that in. I mean, obviously that all happened and that all was taken into account, but like the music scenes of the late 60s and the early 90s to me have always meshed together. They to me, there was always like a common thread between those two eras.
I like to say this, like, with me, when it comes to specifically rock and roll, I think it comes to be a correlation of technology or an advancement in like music recording or production. If you look at, for instance, like, you know, Territorial Pissings or any songs from like Nirvana, they kind of have this little bit of punk rock thing because punk rock had to happen in order for grunge to be
it had to be there. It had to be there, or grunge would not be what you know it as. It wouldn't be as angry and angsty and fucking in your face. And
no one was
giving a
guitar.
Big motherfucking finger to everything. You know what I mean? Like punk rock had to have happened for grunge to have happened.
100%. I think, like, when it comes down to it, you don't hear the usage of power chords as, like, of course you have like Sunshine of Love, like Cream and stuff, but you don't hear the usage of power chords as distorted, as kind of blaring.
Sure, but that's what makes that
90s.
era, the 60s and the early 70s, what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
They
didn't know that. They didn't know. They didn't push it to that level.
No, I think that's what Mark's saying, though, is that it was the production quality. It's conceptually very, very similar.
Yeah, if you look at, for instance, Dick Dale, you know, like that was.
I know about Dick Dale.
I know you know about some Dick Dale. But, you know, that was all about the guitar technology at hand, 100%. The fact that he could play with like a splashy, pre-delayed reverb was something that kind of gave that guitar that sound.
That wet surf sound. Yeah.
That wet surf sound. It's the same thing with Jimi Hendrix. You know, when you hear about, you know, some of the early findings of Jimi Hendrix, it's like when you hear Eric Clapton talk about Jimi Hendrix, it's just that Jimmy had came out with so many different effects and was doing some wild stuff that he was just single-handedly changing how the guitar sounded to people. And that's one of the reasons why he's one of the biggest guitar players in the world. Correlated with the fact that, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think he is as good as a lead guitar player as he is a rhythm guitar player. And the fact that he was able to kind of create some cool rhythm lines is what Jimi Hendrix, to me, sound like one of the coolest guitar players in the world. He was definitely way ahead of his time, 100%, way ahead. And again, that's correlated with music technology. If you look at where metal and where, punk rock and all this stuff is at now, everybody's saying, okay, we want that, but with like the heightened kind of sensibilities of production. Where pop has gone in the last few years is definitely most certainly the most versatile and also the most forward kind of sounding productions that you can get. They're also a lot louder than most productions and so on and so forth. So every producer in every genre seems to kind of follow that kind of guideline. You hear more metal records that kind of, if you took the same sounds you would hear, you could put the same sounds in a pop song and it would work. And that's why I think it's kind of correlated now. That's why you have gent, because the guitar technology has changed in the last few years to where one box literally created that sound, and that was the Fractal Audio Axe effects. Like literally you wouldn't have that idea of sound if you didn't have that kind of thing working for you,
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question about the song? Because I think there's one thing that we didn't touch on, and that even within the context we've talked about, understanding the song, I still don't know. So what is the rooster?
That's one of the things I was trying to figure out. I was doing some research on myself. Yeah, I don't know. I think
I'm Googling lyrics right now. I gotta look at them.
Because I'm sure I'm missing it. I know I'm missing it. There's that's for damn sure. Is it supposed to be like, I feel like I want to, in my brain, again, this is my projection. My brain makes it like into a movie, and I'm imagining the rooster being either a nickname for another guy, or that it was actually like like it was a gunman, or it was a role
I got it right here, actually. Sorry to cut you off.
Please,
the rooster nickname is often mistakenly attributed to a reference to men carrying the M60 machine gun, walking tall machine gun, the muzzle flash from which makes an outline or pattern reminiscent to a rooster's tail.
Interesting. That's and that's kind of, like I said, that's kind of where my brain was going. I didn't make the connection.
Only a Vietnam motherfucker would know that.
Of course.
Right. Exactly. But it makes it super deep and super. That's that's awesome. Yeah, and I'm glad we brought that up, because that ties it all together. That's
what that's also interesting if you really think about it, going back to that. Are we talking about PTSD, or are we talking about nostalgia?
Sure.
Because it's like, to even get that type of line, Jerry didn't serve in the U.S. military. So to get that was a story, and you could tell when he heard that story that was maybe something inside of his dad's PTSD.
Well, so to me, when I hear the whole thing in summation, listening to you guys talk, I just sat quietly and was just kind of taking it all in, and it sounds like, to me, it's Jerry's his taking all of the stories he's heard and telling a story using those stories, and then he includes himself in the story by talking about the son at home, or
yeah.
So like, and I think he's that son, you know what I mean? Like, and that may not even been like true to the history of how it happened in his family, but I think that there's it's like that's how it comes across to me. And again, that's totally my interpretation, but it's like he took these stories all together, and maybe even in his mind, the rooster is was his father. Like that's how he saw his father in the stories in his mind. I don't know if I'm making sense. Like the way that we've been talking all throughout this, that when you hear a story or a song, that you create the projection of the image in your brain. So when he heard all of these stories from his father, maybe this song is the projection, and the rooster was his father. This is how he pictured it. If this was the movie would be the rooster, and his father would be, starring his father. if that's how.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
But super cool, man. I got to tell you, Mark, I would love, whether we do it on air or not, I want to do Down in a Hole with you sometime.
Oh yeah,
damn.
that's a heavy song.
But like I said, we'll do that. We'll talk about that.
I'll do a whole Alice in Chains series.
Yo, and let me can I say this for those of you watching out there, those listeners out there, yo, Mark Dollar, don't you dare try to say like, oh Mark, Mark, just look at Mark Dollar and say like, oh, well, fuck that. Mark Dollar is a fucking absolute master of many, many, many music genres. Don't you dare say some bullshit.
I know it sounds crazy, but when he says,
11.
We'll start
11.
When he start talking about Alice in Chains, I know that if he picked up a guitar right now, we could name any song, and he's gonna go.
Yo, Mark Dollar is one of the most knowledgeable rock and roll fucking musicians you will ever hear from. Ever.
That's a plug for Vin Mott himself. But
thank you, Vin.
So,
thank you, Phil.
Oh, no, man. Hey, man. Like, thank you for taking your time to be with us, man. So, I guess if we're cool, man, I know we've taken a while to get here, but I'd love to see. Can we switch over to Vin? See what Vin brought to the table tonight besides 11?
Yeah.
I would love to give it my all. I actually don't have really too much.
Yeah, man. Hit us with your best shot.
All right. Well, I'm going to take you back from the 90s. Take you a little farther back to
way back at the time.
I'm going to talk about a Rolling Stones song. I can't believe I haven't talked about the Rolling Stones yet, because they're one of my favorite fucking bands to have ever existed, the Rolling Stones. This one comes off of Exile on Main Street, 1972. The tune I'm going to talk about is Torn and Frayed, and I'll just do my usual bit here. I'm going to talk the history and shit. The tune is credited to being recorded at Sunset Sound in LA, but as most people know, this I think why it's credited there is because like a lot of the post production was done there. And most people know that this tune and this record was recorded in, I'm going to mispronounce it, Nelcote, France. I don't know how to fucking pronounce it. Basically, Exile on Main Street was recorded in a mansion in France, done with like a fucking like basically a studio on wheels type of thing. And they set it up in this mansion where they were the Stones were exiled from England at the time, and they recorded this fucking album. It's a 4-part album basically. It's 2 records with 2 sides, right? And Torn and Frayed comes on the side 2 of the first record, the B side of the first record, which tended to be more of the acoustic, country inspired and gospel inspired songwriting that they were doing, and a couple of covers too. Obviously, like I said, this tune has what could only be described as a country soul vibe that was big at the time, from like the Flying Burrito Brothers and the band and shit like that. It's very honky tonk and but also very spiritual in a way. If you listen to a song, you know what I'm talking about. The tune is roughly, and again, Torn and Frayed is the tune. The tune is roughly about a vagabond type musician or a guitar player. It may just be about life as a touring musician in a lower tier touring band, you know, similar to what they were before they were the Stones, to say it, you know what I mean? Like, I think I couldn't pin down who exactly wrote the lyrics. It's just penned as the songwriters are Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. I don't know who did what, but it could just be kind of a throwback to like their origins. You know, themes through this song are like letting yourself get lost in the music is really what like the choruses are about. With the line, let it steal, you know, as long as the guitar plays, let it steal your heart away. Kind of the theme of the tune. But it does have a little bit of a story about what I think is like a vagabond type guitar. It seems to be about a guitar player, and the first few verses he talked about a guitar player, essentially. So I'm gonna just go through it real quick. Verse 1, what I'm calling verse 1, I should say. I don't know if it's really a verse or if it's like the pre-chorus that they threw in first on this tune. The songwriting here is a little bit crazy. The structure, I should say, is a little bit crazy. Is it a pre-chorus? Is it a verse? I don't really know. It's got a lot of repeating ow sounds. Ow. I call it, you know, OW sounds. Ow. So there's down, underground, bound. And when it comes to the word bound in this verse, I should once again get my goddamn lyrics up. When it comes to the word bound in this verse specifically, whoever the song, the lyric writer was playing on the two, you know, at least two sides of what the word could mean in English, right? So he talks about being wound and bound, right? Being constricted in a way. But then he also talks about being bound to follow you down is the last lyric of that verse. Right. Bound to follow you down, like saying you were meant for something, which I think is cool. Another interesting thing about this first verse is there's like a lyrical flub, you know, and I have a note here. Don't tell Pat Patterson that this happens in a Rolling Stone song, because Pat Patterson would freak out if you were taking a lyric writing course at Berkeley. The phrasing on just a dead beat, right? He sings it like this. Let me demonstrate. Just a dead beat. Just a dead beat. Which obviously, if you were going to pronounce it, would be just a dead beat, right? That would, I'm telling you, as a Berkeley student, that would drive Pat Patterson fucking crazy. That would be the first thing he said. If I wrote this tune and I brought this to Pat Patterson's fucking lyric writing class, he would say, well, it would be just a dead beat, right? Phil, you know what I'm talking about? You've read his books.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think there's also, double pun, like there's an entendre there. Like rhythmically, is it on a dead beat? You know, like, is it, you know, like. You know,
oh, man, I didn't even think of that.
Like, is was it their little tongue-in-cheek way of knowing, like, this shouldn't be this way?
I guess it could be, but the Berkeley songwriter in me is saying like, man, that is fucked. Like of a great song of all, and let me tell you too, and I'm going to get back. I always say this. I'm going to address this again later, but it happens again in this song where it's off, and maybe that means you're right. So maybe that means you're right. That it's meant to be that way in their songwriting. But let me tell you, as a Berkeley songwriter, Pat Patterson would rip this part. He would rip it down. He'd be like, okay, let's sing it this way. Just a dead beat. Sing it this way. Just a dead beat. Instead of just a dead beat.
Right.
Just the dead beat, you know what I mean? But they put the emphasis on the beat.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I feel like that might be a tongue in cheek.
It's what we.
Yeah,
call
I was
Berkeley.
about to say it feels a little tongue in cheek for sure.
It definitely could be, and like I said, it does happen again. And I wasn't thinking about it that way. You could be definitely right. What we call that at Berkeley is an off balance phrase. You know, the phrase is off.
At Berkeley, yes.
Where's my cigarette holder?
Let me twirl my mustache. Yes.
So, all right. So, like I said, this tune is about. So that's verse 1. The tune, like I said, is about a vagabond type touring musician. Verse 2 kind of gets into the story of this. Phil, as you've said in the past, it kind of hones that troubadour kind of story, you know. Lots of great imagery of ballrooms and smelly bordellos, dressing rooms filled with parasites, which I think has obvious double meanings of both. As a touring musician, I'm sure both of you know from being touring musicians that
You're talking about roaches.
Been put, you're talking about roaches, but you could also be talking about like fucking groupies, you know, nasty whores who fucking want to suck your dick because you play fucking guitar.
I think just vile people of all sorts, you know.
Vile people of all sorts. You meet them all. You know, being a musician is being on the fringe, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, it's not,
I definitely think. 100%. I definitely think. I always talk about this. It's like, when you're a musician, you're already subjecting yourself to meeting all the people you don't really intend on ever wanting to meet, but you got to meet them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all a part of the experience. And that's what makes like being a touring musician exciting and possibly scary sometimes, but it makes it exciting, you know what I mean? Like you meet all sorts of fucking weirdos on the road, and there's always some kind of parasite following you around, or even just at a one-off gig, you know what I mean? Like, I think, you know, he kind of used a double meaning there. There's a lot of double meanings in this tune. And verse 2 kind of just goes on to describe what any given gig on the road could be like, with the line, on stage the band has got problems and they're a bag of nerves on first night. You know, you could look at that as being like the band is nervous on their first gig of the tour. You could look at that as like the band is not sounding super hot after being on the road for X amount of time and then doing a week stint at a fucking venue. And to me, he never references New York City, but to me, in my mind, I'm thinking New York City. I don't know why that is. He never there's nothing, no word in this that says New York City, but I'm thinking New York City.
Yeah.
It goes back to our own projection thing, you know, like
putting your own story onto someone else's words is.
Yeah, I could see that being in Indiana somewhere, you know.
It could literally be anywhere. For me, it's New York City.
Sure.
I don't know why.
No, I hear you.
Now, verse 3, what I'm calling verse 3, and again, I'm going to come back to the format of this tune. I don't know if calling it verse 3 is the right thing. It's never laid out as a separate verse, but I'm calling it a separate verse. To me, this is a pre-chorus and kind of harks back to verse 1 because it's the same thing musically. I think it's tuned up, baby. Tuned up. Yeah. D-A-E. I think this thing's in a fucking different tuning. I think it's D-A-E-D. You know what I mean? And that's the same thing as where the song comes in. Not only that, but the phrasing, the rhyme structure is exactly the same as verse 1 as it is in verse 3. And verse 3 leads into a chorus. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of a pre-chorus, where verse 1 is like kind of like a faux pre-chorus kind of thing. I don't know.
That's one of the things about the Stones. They always had like very interesting arrangements. That's one of the reasons I personally love. I think of any band of the 60s, the Stones are probably my favorite.
Yeah, yeah. This tune is no exception for sure. Like the form of this tune is definitely not. It's not as much as it is like I said, a country tune. You know, to some extent, it's not your typical verse chorus tune.
Mm-hmm.
There's and with that. There's so much chorus in this tune. There's like 100 fucking choruses in this tune, which is funny too. But verse 3, like I said, it's kind of a rehash of verse 1, which at this point in the song is acting like a pre-chorus, which I think is funny. But the difference between this and verse 1 is this is continuing that story of the troubadour, where verse 1 is more of a broad story kind of story line.
Mm-hmm.
To say it's more of an existential view.
Sure.
Verse 2 is details of the story, and verse 3, even though it mimics musically and phrasing wise verse 1, it continues the detailed story of verse 2. Ain't tied down to no hometown is like a line that sticks out to me, that screams what the theme of the song is, this vagabond touring musician. The chorus is kind of makes a metaphor out of the coat that this guitar player is wearing. The coat is torn and frayed. It's seen much better days. But as long as the guitar plays, it'll steal your heart away. You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of metaphoric. Talking about the underlying theme, I think, of the whole thing, which is that the music in general, whether you're a musician, I mean, in this case, it's a musician, but even if you're not a musician, obviously most people identify with songs and music, and that, like, when you really deep listen to something, like, it can take you away. It can fucking, you know what I mean? All your struggles as a musician can float away when you're playing, you know what I mean? And when you're listening to music, all your fucking fears and shit can just drift away. And that's what the chorus is about. And then there's like 3 more goddamn choruses.
Yeah.
After that. But then there is one more verse. There is one more verse, verse 4, which is again another rehash of what in verse 3 was the pre-chorus. And verse 1 was just that, the first thing we hear lyrically.
Sure.
It's another thing that's got that same rhyme scheme. The first words out of the gate are there's an internal rhyme on both verse 1, verse 3, and this verse 4. And it's more imagery of being a touring musician. He talks about maybe a band member, Joe. I think he names him Joe. Look, Joseph, I think is what his name is. Joe's got a cough. Sounds kind of rough. Yeah, and the codeine to fix it. Fucking, he's talking about, somebody gets sick on the road, get some medicine, blah, blah, blah. Fucking another off-balance phrase. Oh, I told you I was going to find you another one. Doctors prescribes drugstore supplies. But the way he sings it is doctors prescribes. Doctor prescribes. Drugstores subscribes. Fuck. Doctor prescribes drugstore supplies, which Pat Patterson would just have a field day with.
Of course.
Let's try that. Doctor prescribes. Doctor prescribes. And then the next line after that, doctor prescribes, drugstore subscribes. Yeah, who's gonna help him kick it? And I think that's maybe a reference to all the drugs they were doing or alcohol they were consuming.
Well,
to me.
Well, yeah, I mean,
who's gonna help him kick this is not gonna be just a fucking pill you take. You know what I mean? That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, well, no. Again, you were talking about at this time period they were the guys they were hanging with, the Flying Burrito Brothers and all those dudes. Ultimately they had to be broken up. Like they were like the Stones had to remove themselves from those guys because of the rowdiness that they were like. That's like talked about and known that they loved each other. That's where Wild Horses is actually a Flying Burrito Brothers song. That I forget if the Stones put it out first or which one came first. They both put it out, but it's because
they were very close. That whole era from Sticky Fingers to Exile to what the fuck was the next Let It Bleed, like that all had that fucking combo of country music mixed with soul and gospel. Like I said at the beginning, this tune and a lot of tunes on this record and the record before it and after it all have like a honky-tonk feel.
Sure.
But in a way, it's also spiritual feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this tune could go in multiple directions, Yeah.
I feel like, the Stones were just true students of the game.
Yeah.
Like they learned every aspect of the genres that they loved and tried to figure out a way to make it their own. Like you can't always get you what you want. I always kind of got a gospel vibe, not to mention that there's a choir in that song. I've always gotten a gospel vibe from them,
Yeah.
The way they play guitar is kind of gospel-esque as well.
Sure. Well, isn't that open G 5-string thing come from gospel? Or maybe it comes from country? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that I've read that. So maybe I just read it in Keith Richards' fucking book. But yeah. I know Ry Cooder is the one who introduced Keith to the 5-string open G thing.
Interesting.
But, no. I mean, I don't think he's playing open G here, though. Keith is playing the acoustic guitar on this track.
Yeah.
I think that he may be playing like a rhythm track on his telly or something. There's, when you hear this track, the main guitar sound you hear, I think, other than the acoustic, is the pedal steel, and that's a guy named, I think I have his name here. No, I didn't write his name down. But anyway, there's a killer pedal steel solo, and there's pedal steel licks all through it, fills and shit.
One thing I love about the Stones is that they're very elusive in terms of their guitar arrangement. A lot of times you do hear, you seem like you might hear one guitar, but lo and behold, it could be two guitars like working together in such a way that you couldn't really tell.
Yeah, and with the way, like maybe not specifically with this song, but with a lot of Stones songs, is like, to me, sometimes it sounds like there's like 100 goddamn guitars.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like Start Me Up.
That open G tuning, I feel like that Keith did do a lot, and fucking
and just the doubles and stacks. Again, they also came up in the big multi-track era too, so where it's like they had to use like 38 tracks for guitars, they would,
And not only that, but just the voicing of the 5-string thing and that hammer-on thing he was known for, like, that brings that fucking, it's sort of the 4-chord, but it's not all of the 4-chord, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And like how his rhythm, I mean, Keith Richards is, a lot of people don't realize that Keith, maybe non-musicians don't realize that Keith Richards is a rhythm guitar player. He's not the lead player. He's not the one you hear playing the single line shit. You know what I mean? That's Brian Jones and Mick Jones and fucking what's the guy's name for Faces, who's now the Stones guitar player. That's those guys. Keith is the guy underneath it, and when you listen to the rhythm guitar parts, it's the way he comes in and out of his, he takes from soul music, and he takes from gospel, he takes from country, and makes it kind of like when people described like Robert Johnson's playing as like he was like playing piano on guitar, and there were so many moving parts to his guitar playing. That's kind of what Keith was doing. There's a lot of like moving entities to his rhythm guitar playing, and it's not just honking down on chords and playing.
Yeah, no, he's moving. He's
just
moving
that blues
stuff around.
He was playing with these really crazy syncopated things and elongated rhythms, and it's crazy, man. From doing this research today, I was like instantly transported to like, man, I forgot how much I love the fucking Stones, man.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Best. And Keith is the best fucking guitar player in rock and roll.
Yeah, he's cold-blooded, man.
Yeah.
I was watching the Chuck Berry documentary the other day.
And where he puts together the band, and Chuck's yelling at him, if you're going to play the part, you got to play it right. He's trying to play the intro to Carol, and he's fucking it up, and Chuck's yelling at him. If you're going to play the fucking intro, you're going to fucking play it right.
Yeah, man. I mean, going back to what you're saying, I mean, this is that's basically why we started doing what we're doing, is, just to appreciate, and that's why I love just shooting the shit about this stuff with you guys in general, is that, there's a sincere passion and love that we all have for these things. And I think stopping every now and then, we take it for granted. I think as musicians, we end up taking it for granted. We just, as teachers in particular, we're burnt out in some ways, and we don't really take the time to really take a time. Like I said, why is this song so important to me? That's what I want to know. Like,
dude, to me, this song, Torn and Frayed, like, it's not a major hit by the Stones, right? It's not your Jumpin' Jack Flash. It's not Satisfaction. It's not fucking Street Fighting Man.
Yeah.
This song to me, I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't even think I knew it was about a guitar player before today, but something about the phrasings, and that like I think it's every sixth line, and which would be the first lines of what I call the pre-choruses here, have the internal rhyme. Something about it just makes me think, made me, over the last 15 fucking years I've been listening to this tune more, like, it sonically, it all stems from the lyrics. Like, it just, something about it makes me think this is like a song about me. You know what I mean? This is a song about my struggle, you know?
No,
I think the Stones were very bold to, write stuff, right in that vein, I also think, I mean, if you really look at the Stones, and again, one of the things I love about them is you knew they weren't like the best writers off the bat. I mean, the first few years they had to make covers.
Sure.
So it's like them getting into the vibe of writing probably wasn't necessarily the easiest for them.
We all know, man, like, Mick Jagger is not the world's greatest singer. You know what I mean? Like, he's not the greatest fucking singer. You know what I mean?
But he is arguably one of the greatest performers that has ever lived.
Oh yeah,
and in that, he is one of the greatest singers because he's not one of the greatest singers. You know what I mean? Because his whole vibe, it's not about the technique. It's about the vibe he put out. You know what I mean? It's about
we
could do that for 3 hours too, nonstop.
And still, Mark, welcome to our world. This is like every week for us, man. We hit a point where we're like, man, we could go fucking 3 more fucking days about this shit.
He was talking about Mick doing 3 hours.
Yo, he'll do fucking 3. Maybe not anymore, but he
well,
he's definitely
I'm serious. I'm telling you, I've seen.
Before COVID, there was videos of him getting ready for tour and him just dancing down the stages. Like, that's what he does. Is once the stage is built in venues, he just does a dance. That's his workout every day. We could definitely talk all day about the stuff.
All day.
And everything. And Mark, you weren't around when we were talking about it, but Vin and I were talking about, we definitely got to do a day with you talking about some MJ. That's a whole, obviously, day.
I don't even want to talk that day. So, I just want to sit here. I don't know.
I would love to.
All I know, look. My extension of MJ is Free Willy.
Well, Mark and I have done many years, have been in the trenches with Michael Jackson. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
So
we taught 9-year-old kids how to play Michael Jackson.
But
I'm too late for that shit. I just want to hear that fucking Free Willy soundtrack.
But like I said, we'll have to do that. We'll definitely talk about that. At this point, we're definitely starting to run a little close on time here again.
Let's do it. Yeah, so, this is going to be a long one for sure.
Yeah, no. So I just wanted to just wrap it up, and again, we can always have Mark back, and I think we most definitely will.
I think we'll definitely have.
But
I'm here, guys.
We'll do an MJ day. We'll do fucking all sorts of shit, man.
Yeah.
Talk about some gospel guitar.
Let's do it.
So just the last kind of final thoughts here. We've got, again, our Spotify playlist that is up that is called it's just called Vin and Phil Show. It has all of the songs that we've talked about before and on this episode. And we talked about a bunch today, so you're going to definitely want to take a peek in there. We got deep at some of these. We thought we were going to stay just surface level, and instead we got like all the way to the deep end. That's for sure. So check that out. Then, secondly, the three of us are working musicians and producers, music industry folk, basically. And if you're interested in helping us out of the kindness of your heart, supporting us, we appreciate. Put a little love in our cup.
Yeah, put a little love in our cup. We use all the love we can get.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
So Vin and I use Venmo, and Vin's is at Vincent-Mott, at Vincent-Mott, sorry, M-O-T-T, 2 T's. Mine is at Phil-Silverberg, and Mark uses Cashapp and his is $Godriveraudio. That's with a capital G, all one word. And like I said, no pressure there, but if you are feeling like you want to throw some love in a tip cup, or love in the cup, whatever, Vin says it better than me.
Give me a little drink from your loving cup. Same album.
And then last but not least, also, again, check out Vin's new project. It's awesome, and the links will be attached down here in the description, and we'll attach that. I also have a new track that came out last Friday called Oolong. I'll put the link to that. And then Mark has a bunch of projects that he was talking about at the beginning of the episode. Mark, do you want to recap any of those real fast?
Views into Vastness, Death Metal Chicks, Aaron Lockett. Check all those projects out. They'll be out coming up in the late summer, early fall.
Awesome.
Fuck yeah.
We'll be keeping our fans in the loop with that too. And other than that, I think that just about wraps it up for us today. So this was awesome. And before we go, just again, Mark, huge thank you for
thank you, man. Yeah,
thank you guys. You guys are awesome as usual. Looking forward to coming back.
Absolutely, man. No, we know you're a busy dude, but this is exactly what I was hoping for, man. Just a wonderful conversation with the homies. So, can't ask for more than that. And that wraps it up. So thank you, everybody.